Well, the results are in, and I think it should be very clear that the new governor of Virginia is as much of a liar and a thug as any Christian fascist. He's a little bit more polished, obviously, a slicker. But I want to point something out, thanks to Chris Cillizza at CNN, who also points it out. And that is in the final days of the Virginia governor's race, how Youngkin did everything he could to make it clear that the election was a referendum on what is being taught to the kids in school in Virginia. He told Fox News over the weekend, quote, "There's no place for critical race theory in our school system, and why on day one I'm going to ban it. You see, critical race theory teaches children to see everything through a lens of race, and then to divide them into buckets and have children who are called privileged and others who are called victims." End quote. Now, that's what Youngkin said right before the election in an interview with one of the speakers on the sewer, one of the more filthy speakers on the Fox sewer, and that's this Mark Levin. Now, this focus on critical race theory, which I'll get to in a second, it's oh God, it's worn off on Republican voters, Christian fascist voters. And so many of these Christian fascist voters name education as the main issue in the campaign that just ended in Virginia with the election of Youngkin. And critical race theory in particular, the voters of Virginia have been so concerned about that, the white people, the white Christian fascists. So what does critical race theory actually mean? Well, in a video posted Monday by a two-man comedy act called The Good Liars, they asked a Virginia voter at random what the most important issue was to him, this white man, in the governor's race. And the guy responds, quote, and I posted this, I think, at my Twitter page, maybe not. But this white guy responds, "The most important issue is getting back to the basics of teaching children, not teaching them critical race theory," end quote. And he's then asked what critical race theory is. And he answers, quote, "I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because I don't understand it that much, but it's something, what little bit I know, I don't care for," end quote. And the person interviewing him presses a little bit further for any details this white man might have about CRT. And then the white man responds, quote, "I don't have that much knowledge on it, but it's something that I don't care for." Well, right. But if you need an example of just how dumb things have gotten in American politics now, there it was. For the record, let me quote to you what critical race theory actually is, and this comes courtesy of Education Week publication. Quote, "Critical race theory is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. The core idea is that race is a social construct, and that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. A good example is when, in the 1930s, government officials literally drew lines around areas deemed poor financial risks, often explicitly due to the racial composition of inhabitants in that area. Banks subsequently refused to offer mortgages to black people in those areas," end quote. And here's another helpful definition, courtesy of the Brookings Institution. Quote, CRT does not attribute racism to white people as individuals, or even to entire groups of people. Simply put, critical race theory states that U.S. social institutions, for example, the criminal justice system, the education system, the labor market, the housing market, the healthcare system, all of them are laced with racism embedded in the laws, regulations, rules, and procedures that lead to different outcomes depending on race. End quote. So the basic idea, and this is something I've talked about for a very long time, but the basic idea is that racism is systemic in many of the institutions upon which we Americans are supposed to rely in this country. And if we do so, if we rely on these institutions and we're black, we're going to be fucked severely, badly, injuriously. Something is going to be taken from us. Our property, our voting rights, our dignity, something. And that by acknowledging that reality of systemic racism in this country, we can work to overcome it. That's all. Critical race theory is not being taught in any public school system in America, much less Virginia. And it's not new. And it's an academic framework for professors to study themselves to see what it is that has driven racism in this country since the very beginning. Now, as I mentioned, it's not new. It's been around for 40 years. Critical race theory, but all of a sudden, it became a hot button issue for Christian fascists, and we can thank, in part, the Fox Sewer decision to put it front and center in their daily programming, especially with the scum that operate from the platform of Fox, the Fox Sewer, propagandists who are hell-bent, like Tucker Carlson, on destroying the country. Jesus Christ. Now, back in June, Florida, another state run by a Christian fascist, Florida banned the teaching of CRT in its public schools. And the Republican Christian fascist governor, Ron DeSantis, insisted on his Twitter feed that, quote, it teaches kids to hate our country and to hate each other. It is state-sanctioned racism and has no place in Florida schools. End quote. Teaches kids to hate each other. State-sanctioned racism. A few months before that, Idaho banned any teaching that, quote, individuals by virtue of sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin are inherently responsible for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race, sex, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin. End quote. Which is, what's the phrase, a red herring. No one who designed critical race theory as a framework for intellectuals to try to understand and come to terms with, no one has suggested what Idaho banned. And that is any teaching that individuals are responsible for actions committed by other members who are like them. That's not what critical race theory is, but it didn't matter a damn to Youngkin, the guy who is now the governor of Virginia. He took the idea that the Christian fascists have carefully cultivated and developed and ran with it and convinced the white people. He convinced the white people in the suburbs around the cities in Virginia that the Negroes are coming. The Negroes are coming. The Black Africans are coming, and they're going to infiltrate the classrooms of our precious white children and teach them to hate each other and teach them that they are little racists. This is what Youngkin did. Now, you can't blame Youngkin for what he did. He is a sick son of a bitch who is willing to hitch his wagon to these lies and deceptions and destructive impulses to bring America to its knees. But you can blame, if you are so inclined, the white people who bought into this and continue to buy into it, that critical race theory has got to be rooted out of our public schools, when in fact it's not there. But this is another part of the big lie. And it's working. A man who is no more qualified to be governor of Virginia than I am is now the governor of Virginia. Now, there are ways to teach our kids about race and racism, and it should be taught. There's a legitimate debate over how it should be taught. But that's not what is going on right now. What is going on right now is this totally untrue, this total lie has been fed to white people that critical race theory is some horrible thing that's being taught to our children. And the Christian fascists have got to root it out, have got to make it go away, when it's not being taught anywhere. So we have the Christian fascist media in this country and the Christian fascist politicians saying that critical race theory teaches white kids that they're bad and to blame for the racial problems in the country, which critical race theory simply does not say. And as Chris Cillizza points out at CNN, unfortunately, people don't do any of their own research to even understand the basics of what CRT is and what the debate is really about. Which leads to interviews like the one I just cited for you. A man who says critical race theory is the most important issue in the governor's race, but he has no idea what it is. But the truth is that it doesn't matter any longer what the truth is. This is the legacy of this filthy goddamn Nazi Donald Trump. This is his legacy. Lies, deception, destruction. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.